Hello, and welcome back to our conversations. We are,
Ah.
hi, Ella.
Hello.
Okay, full disclosure, Ella's gonna hate that I'm gonna say this, but I always say in the intro just because I try to just come up with it while I'm talking here. And so I'm gonna try not to say so that's where that delay came from. So today we're going to talk about, we're partway into the year. It is March 20th, and we had a conversation, I should say, back, I think it was right in the new year, on goal setting and all this good stuff. And what we find, and a lot of the lingo that Ellie, you probably are hearing the same thing I'm hearing. A lot of people are talking about falling off the wagon, not fulfilling the promises they had made to themselves earlier in the year. And so we're just going to have
I
a
think in that
conversation.
video, I think in that video I had mentioned even I had actually looked up the statistics of how many people even execute their goals to the end of January. And it was like by the end, I might butcher this, but it was like 45% or something crazy don't even follow through to the end of the month. So if you're still following through, good on you. But we thought we'd do a little intervention.
Intervention is a great word. I think that it deserves talking about, and I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes with you because, like I said, we hear a lot of the same things from the women that were around all the time. I fell off the wagon is the biggest thing that people say, and it's honestly such a huge pet peeve for me, and I'll tell you why as we get into it. But yeah, let's have a conversation about it and see where it goes.
Alrighty. I'm glad that you mentioned this first because I actually wrote out a question. Because I know that you believe in the power of language and how our subconscious mind is always listening, and that even like you program your mind to believe the things that you speak of. So if you're telling yourself you've fallen off the wagon or whatever it is, um, you're you're setting yourself up for failure, even if you haven't failed yet. It's just maybe what you've deemed as unsuccessful. But I know that you don't like this word and I or this type of language. And I wanted to ask you why specifically, like, what are your opinions on it and why do you think it's harmful?
Oh my goodness, it's one of the most common things I hear people say, whether it's in person or people checking in online with me, and everything is relative to, like, we have to have context, right? So I always say on in these conversations, most of the people that I deal with are looking to improve lifestyle habits. They're looking for fat loss. They're looking for longevity. Like, they have specific goals around health. And so when they come to me and they say, or when they've struggled a little bit and they say, I fell off the wagon, it just does something to me. I'm like, it's just so
You
finite
never
when
even
people
got
say that.
started yet.
I know. And I think that the reason I dislike it so much is because we have this idea, or it takes a long time to coach this out of women. The idea that they either have to be perfect or not,
It's very
right? And
all
I
or
think that's
nothing. It's very all or nothing, and it goes in back into like we've had tons of conversations on failure and how viewing things as failure is like the only failure that you can have. You don't
mhm.
actually fail unless you think you failed. But yeah, it's funny how people they haven't even given themselves the chance, they haven't even allowed themselves to see their own potential, and they're already using this language. Oh, I've fallen off. I give up. I'm just not gonna continue on.
Mhm. So yeah, I think definitely I agree with everything that you just said. It's just the thing with when people use the term falling off the wagon, like I said, like when I think of falling off the wagon, I think, well, that kind of hurts. But obviously not enough to keep people from continuing to make the choices. But I actually looked up one time where that came from when people said, because I was like, what does that even mean? Like, I ask people and they say, oh, I fell off the wagon. I'm like, explain. Like, what does falling off the wagon mean? And it actually was a term it started with, like, it's to do with alcohol. And so what it means when people, yeah. Yeah, it's not crazy. When you fall off the wagon, like falling off the wagon is a term for people who have um, issues with alcohol consumption. And when they fall off the wagon, it's because they go back to drinking excessive amounts of alcohol. And so I'm like, I don't even like that because I don't know, I'm just not buying it. And I definitely think that language is so, so important. What we believe what we say. And so I just think, it's time we teach women that there's really no such thing as perfection. Like trying to be perfect is going to keep you from ever achieving greatness. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Having an understanding, like I always say you have to have you can have high standards, but you have to have compassion. And what I mean by that is when we have self-compassion, when we have high standard with self-compassion, it means that we want to achieve these things, but we have to understand that there's all this, space in between where we are and where we think we're going, and that's called life, right? That's getting sick, that's having a family, that's, being asked to do something that you maybe hadn't planned on doing but decide you're going to do. Like it's life. And so we have to have compassion for the fact that we can't execute things perfectly
I was gonna
all the
say,
time.
sorry to interject, but I was gonna say having that, I'm gonna quote you, but having that all or nothing mentality leaves you with all or nothing. And when
Mhm.
it comes to having goals and having that mentality, it's very dangerous to think like it's very normal to for everything not to go right, you know? So
Mhm.
it's part of the human experience. You're not always going to have an amazing day. There's always going to be something that comes up. And to think that you're just going to perfectly follow this like little plan that you've created is foolish. It's having, and what you and me like to call it is that bounce back period where you you allow yourself to maybe rest, you allow yourself to maybe eat unhealthy or sleep in, you allow yourself to do the things, but one, you don't beat yourself up over it. And two, you know and already have healthy habits implemented that you know work for you that allow you to get back on track or whatever you want to say, whatever language you.
Yeah, started reterming that wobbling, right? It's normal to wobble a little once in a while, and it's not nearly as aggressive. I feel like it lands a little bit, it does something a little bit nicer to our nervous system. We're not in this constant state of all or nothing, right? Like hot or cold or trying to repair or trying to find a repair system. But what happens, I see this a lot, and especially, January 1st, people, we've definitely talked about this. People come out of the holidays, they haven't moved as much in December in the frozen tundra where we live. It's really cold usually, and it's really dark. And so, we're going into the shortest day of the year, shortest daytime, like daylight, right? And so naturally people they're not moving as much, like people argue, well, they're shopping and stuff, but they're just not as consistent with their lifestyle habits. They have more Christmas parties, they have staff parties, they have get-togethers with friends, a couple Christmases with their families, right? Like it's just different. So by the time January 1 rolls around, or even the first week of January, people, they usually have a hot holiday booked. And so they're like, I'm going to go hard. I'm going to lose X amount of weight. I'm going to work out every single day. I'm not going to miss anything. People that decide that, maybe they've had some unpleasant unpleasantries, we'll say, over the
I
holidays,
find
decide
they almost try to like, and this is just my perception of it, but like they beat themselves up with exercise and eating healthy and they go all in and they burn out so
yeah.
quickly within like a week, 2 weeks.
That's
They
exactly
like
where I was going with this.
rarely
Like,
you've seen it a whole month. It like it's not sustainable at all.
well, we usually find like it's like what I've observed over many years is very cyclical, much like women. And so they might
We're
be able to
cyclical
hold on
beings.
to it for 4 weeks, maybe 5, not likely though. But definitely by kind of somewhere between week 4 to week 7, yeah, you're 100% right. They've completely burnt out. They're not doing anything. They fall off the wagon for an undetermined period of time. It depends on how good their foundations are going into it, right? So
And then,
women
yeah, and then
that
not
don't
only are they
have,
beating themselves up with like that exercise nutrition, then after when they can't fulfill this unsustainable whatever it is, they then beat themselves up even more. And it's like they're never giving themselves that opportunity to reach the place they want to reach because it's not out of compassion and love, it's out of like desperateness and scarcity.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just it's interesting to watch, right? Because you can see it unravel with people. They get really, really, like you said, hard on themselves. They start over-exercising and under-eating. And
Keto
yeah,
diet
it's
or
just
whatever it is.
it's really crazy, actually. Like, if I had $1, I think I say this a lot too. If I had $1 for every time someone came to me and said, I'm just going to do a keto diet. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do that until like for 4 weeks. And I'm like, and then what? And then what? You'll
And then
burn
you'll
out
still
and
be
you'll end up
alive.
exactly where you are.
You'll still be
Yeah.
alive. You'll still have your human needs and desires and your keto diet and this is no shame or hate on keto. This is just an example because we've seen it a
It's
lot.
just the easiest thing to pick on.
Yes. But but yes, people then they get back to the place they were before the keto diet, realizing that their life is still somewhat the same. They're just a lot more hungry or whatever it is. And then there's the guilt, there's the shame until they kind of forget about it. And then they're like, I'm just going to do it again. I've heard good things about it. And it's like not sustainable.
Yeah. It just,
And it's not that keto's not sustainable, it's the mentality surrounding like how you're entering, whether it's a diet, exercise, whatever it is, be anything.
it just breeds, um, like a binge and restrict. And this, like, when I say binge and restrict, I don't mean exclusively food. I mean food, I mean nutrition, I mean spending, I mean Netflix, I mean everything, right? Like we really like entrench this binge and restrict habit. And that applies to a lot of areas of life. And it's so crazy because there's a way better way. And so one thing that I think, like one of the reasons I love talking about this specifically, like it's all kind of stemmed around falling off the wagon, but that binge and restrict that people do, where January 1st, they like we said, they decide they're gonna eat, the same 4 foods from 2 different food groups because they know that worked for them at one point to get a result. But it wasn't sustainable and it was short-lived, right? And they're gonna over-exercise because that's what worked at one point, but it doesn't work anymore. There's a better way because I actually was just having this conversation, Ellie, you were here for this last night, in my training studio with one of the ladies that we just absolutely adore. But I was saying the if we can, oh my gosh, okay, sorry. I have to back this up because there was just so much that we talked about last night in that space. But number one, the goal needs to be to create solid foundations with, I think, like what I think of as the pillars of wellness, right? Like I preach this to everybody because how
And that
we
starts with getting good with
exercise,
yourself, which I think we've talked about these
but
pillars. I
like
think it's our previous episode, or maybe the one before that. But
exercise, nutrition, hydration, sleep, stress management, and social engagement, connection, relationships, including the relationship you have with yourself. They create the pillars of well-being. And so when women, maybe men do it, I honestly couldn't tell you, but when
yeah, we
women
don't
do
speak for
this
men.
thing where, okay, so number one, if we eat really, really restricted, like if we do this kind of binge and restrict with nutrition to get a result, it topples a lot of those pillars. So if we think of those 6 things as like like columns that are holding up the foundation of a great life and a great experience of life and a great experience of ourselves. If we knock over the nutrition pillar and we're taking in really limited micronutrients, we're not getting enough, like we don't have enough energy availability. We're not eating enough food to have energy for all the other things, right? Like I'm
Not
like, if we
only
look,
is not only is your foundation of life like this because one of the pillars are missing, but also your sleep is unstable.
oh my
And
gosh,
maybe because your sleep is unstable, your relationships are unstable. And then it creates this really rocky
it's
foundation.
so wobbly, right? It's where the wobble comes in. And what we were talking about last night was when the nutrition pillar starts to topple a little bit, yeah, it knocks down, well, number one, it
I think
knocks
not
over
even
the,
just the nutrition, not even just the nutrition. I think the nutrition is like
hold on, I'm on
unreasonable
something
for a
here.
lot
You
of
got to hear
people.
me out
Okay,
for a
please.
second. When you topple your nutrition pillar, it knocks over your exercise pillar, right? When you don't have enough energy to even just like get around and work and have a relationship and take care of your kids and run your business, or, you know, if you work for someone, whatever that is, then that topples your exercise. So then you're not exercising. And when you don't exercise, you don't build up sleep pressure in your brain. So then the next one starts to fall. And the minute the sleep pillar falls, your relationships get really rocky or wobbly, your relationship with yourself. That is literally, and that, okay, it's so cyclical also, but
I
if
was
we're
gonna
not
say it's
managing it,
those two pillars are like they're very important, and I think they're the most common for people to maybe struggle with that create that rocky wobbliness. But it's any one of the pillars if you're not putting that love and intention and nurturing each of the pillars, your foundation for having a wholesome, happy life isn't very stable at all.
oh my God, it's honestly so true. Like I literally want to draw this. I want to draw this because it makes so much sense to me. And you're absolutely right. Like it's not, we say nutrition first because it's the most tangible thing and it's the number one thing. Like people know that if they improve their nutrition habits, they'll improve a lot of things, right? They'll improve body composition, they'll improve you know, their experiences, they'll improve all these things. But it doesn't matter, right? Like when we see client check-ins after reviewing data for years and years, we ask clients about their hydration. When they do a client check-in, they always fill in what their hydration was on a score. Out of 7 days, how many days did you hit your water intake? And I'll say like, you know, I love making things really simple. And so forever I had like a big jug that I would fill in the morning. I would empty it in the morning and then I would fill it in the afternoon and I would empty it by bedtime. And that is like, I think is like 1.5 liters. So about 3 liters per day, which, you know, especially on training days, it's pretty easy to get in. And then I decided that I was going to go to something like it, I didn't want to drink out of plastic and I didn't want to carry a really heavy metal jug. So I went to something like this. And I just don't like it's just not in my habit to fill it. And I mean, I've been doing this forever.
That's how I am with this too. So I used to use the same
Yeah.
bottle as you, but I was like, hmm, this plastic, I don't know. So
Hey,
I'm
but
drinking out of glass, but I'm not super consistent with this like the way I was with the other bottle. So
I know,
maybe
right?
business idea, make a clean big water bottle. But
Oh,
yeah,
it's just the
not as
weight of them
consistent.
though. Like I'm like, how can I haul? Because I love filtered water, and I'm like, how can I haul a super heavy ass jug from home every day? I mean, I can, but I also bring a laptop and a bunch of other things. I need to, moral of the story, I think I need to get some organization around some things. But my point is, when I stopped drinking as much water, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt really tired. And so and this is what I see with the girls. So I started paying attention to my client check-ins. When they don't drink as much water, when they're not hitting their water intake consistently, their sleep sucks. And I think it's because they don't have the same, like they're just not getting themselves tired, right? Like they're not building up that sleep pressure in their brain so that they have restful sleep. And then when they're not sleeping, their prefrontal cortex is offline and they can't for the life of them make a good nutrition choice. I'll say good because good is relative, right? But they can't align with their values on nutrition for the life of them.
Wow.
And so it's like we need to really start to teach people about these pillars.
Hmm. I think so too. And I think too, nutrition is a big one for people. Like water's huge, nutrition is the main, and I think a lot of people really overcomplicate it.
They
And
do really overcomplicate it. And they have such a restrictive mindset around nutrition, right? Like it's sad.
actually, my friend who's a doctor, he told me that he does something called like motivational interviewing for
Oh,
his
amazing.
patients. And instead of like telling his patients, oh, you should eat this or you shouldn't eat this, because everyone kind of like, you kind of know what you should and shouldn't be eating. But all he had them do was take pictures of the food they're eating and create like a photo journal so
Oh,
that
yeah.
then when they come back, they could look at it together. And and you don't need to say anything because you can just look at the photos, you can look at the time you were eating, what you're eating, how much of it, and it tells you everything you need to know about yourself. If you feel guilty about it, chances are that shouldn't be what you're doing. But I think a lot of us, we we I've seen it a lot with your clients that they'll they'll kind of like kill themselves with salads and and chicken, and they'll do that, but then they'll get home and then say it's the evening and they'll maybe indulge in something that because they're hungry and they're not making the right choices
Mhm.
day to
Dieting
sustain
is such
the
an
energy that they need. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying like dieting is such a fascinating thing to watch people maneuver around. Dieting, right? Because when we're dieting, like when someone diets for weight loss, while it might be a really good thing for them depending on where they are in their life, dieting is really essentially just slow starvation. And our body is so smart, right? So when you're trying so hard, like the busiest parts of your day, when you're trying to live on like I'm so goddamn tired of people telling me that they're eating chicken salads. Like I'm like, I would die. I would die. But so they're restricting their energy intake in the times of the day that they maybe they're not moving a lot, like if they're sitting at a desk or they have a fairly sedentary job. But our bodies aren't the only things that need calories for energy, right? Like our brains also need calories for energy.
I want to
And
ask you something
so
actually because I feel like you know this, you can confirm this for me, but what I'm hearing, or I don't know if you're getting to this, but because our bodies are so smart, if we're essentially like slow starvationing or slowly starving ourselves, sorry, doesn't our body know? And wouldn't it hold on more to the things that you're putting in it? Because it's like, oh no, I don't know when I'm gonna have access to food next.
oh, definitely. Like especially for women, when we are in a restricted, like when we're restricting calorie intake, especially if it's extreme, dieting is a major stressor on the system, right? And so stress in the system causes a plethora of things to happen. But essentially what happens, just like when you look at it for kind of easy understanding, if you're starving yourself all day, by the time you get home at night you're so checked out and so offline that it can be really really challenging to bring attention and intention to the foods you eat. And I'm telling you that like majority of things that I talk about, number one, I see them in clients, but I also have lived this myself, right? Like like contest prep is so
A
extreme.
very common experience for so many women. It's kind
Yeah,
of it's
you're
kind of how
kind
we're
of
taught in a way.
yeah, if you're really aggressive with fat loss, it takes just an ungodly amount of willpower to try to stick to something. And I think it's incredibly challenging for women, especially at certain points in their menstrual cycle. And so what ends up happening is like this really bad cycle of restriction, 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 binging, and then feeling really terrible and then going back into this restriction cycle, right? And so it's hard
There's
for people to
those
get out of it.
negative emotions associated with it
Oh my
that
gosh, yeah, it's not
that
even
like
the food.
at this point it's not even the food you're eating, it's
Mhm.
the emotion that you've associated with the food, that no matter how good you're eating, we don't do good or bad foods. Food is food. But no matter, like, say you use these terms, no matter how good or bad you're eating, like that food is just gonna be bad for you because you've associated this negativity with the food that you're putting into your body. It's not going to, like, food. I might sound a little crazy with this, but food are atoms. Atoms carry energy. If you are putting this energy into your food that like you're so shameful and you're treating it as if it's this negative thing, you're putting that in you and then it becomes a part of you and then you're gonna feel even worse about yourself.
Oh my goodness. I feel like nutrition is it's so complex, especially for women, because I don't believe that men, not as often for sure, right? They might once in a while attach emotion to food, but nowhere near the way women do. Like women are very emotional with the way that they eat, and their feelings surrounding what they've done and whether they categorize it as good, bad, like success, shame, like whatever, right? And so there's just so much emotion attached to food and something that we have to do all the time. But yeah, it's really crazy.
It
And
is. Like
so
there definitely are men who I'm sure are emotional eaters, but if you look at like the average person, men compared to women, men do not nearly struggle with as much with like wanting to achieve fat loss. And like it's the most, I feel like it's the most common thing for women, even young girls. Like it's concerning,
yeah,
but
we talked about
like,
this last time.
we did. I'm sure
Well,
we
we kind of got into it a little bit, like talked a little bit about it, but um I think it is definitely a blanket statement, but it's like if you, yeah, statistically, I'm sure if you looked, like, you know, men, like I think most people that want to lose fat or that obsess about it are women. Like it's like the number one, it's a
well, even
ridiculous
you,
industry. Like the fat loss
you've had
industry is insane.
90%, 98% more women clients come to you.
Oh my gosh.
than
You know what I was gonna say though? I was going somewhere with this. Dave and I have had this conversation lots. Like we've talked about it over and over again. The difference, it's so again, just incredibly fascinating just to be an observer and to watch habits, patterns, mindsets, all these things with people. When a man wants to lose weight, he stops drinking beer, stops eating chips, starts going to the gym and lifting heavy SHIT, lifting heavy things. And he just makes a little bit better habit, like lifestyle choices. He doesn't go start eating chicken and salad. He doesn't start doing ridiculous amounts of cardio. He doesn't start obsessing and weighing himself 10 times a day to see if he lost weight. Like males versus females, so different. Like women,
and it's
men
significantly
cut out
for men to lose weight than
beer,
women. I'm sure there's
women
like
stop
hormones.
eating food altogether. Like they eat the lowest nutrition food and they exercise 10 times more than they ever have. And then that's where burnout comes from.
And if you look at it, men typically tend to lose weight easier than women do. And it's not, I'm sure there's like hormones and those kinds of things associated with it as well, but it's that having that practical approach and not tying in the emotions, the guilt, the shame, the all of it.
It's honestly so true. Like they're just so much more logical in their approach to making change. Like a man will be like, okay, I've been kind of a butt. I've been doing all these things that don't align with the vision I have of myself. And so I'm going to change these couple things, but women don't do that. And so we can learn a
Which,
lot.
by the way, isn't a good or bad thing. We're not shaming women here
Oh.
or men or any of that. We're just comparing because like you've seen it in your career. It's very like the differences are very distinct.
It is really crazy to watch. And so, yeah, we have a lot of, Dave and I have a lot of conversations about that because
Well, you
it's,
both trained, both Dave has trained also men and women, and he's a man, and so he has that very practical approach to it. And and I've heard him say, like, I wonder why it's just not so simple for my female clients. Like, they seem to struggle a lot more, and not because there's anything wrong with them or anything. It's just, I think the way our brains and our hormones and all of that operates.
it's because of the way we think and the way we feel, right? Like a lot of what women do is guided by their feelings on things, I think. Like that's my observation anyway. And so, yeah, we're just not really at it. And so it's mildly entertaining because yeah, I'll be the first to say I've done all the dumb things that people that I'm like, that
I
is so
actually have a
silly. Why did I ever do
question.
that? That's ridiculous.
I actually have a question for you. So we've
Okay.
talked in like in previous videos about how, like you speak from experience. Your life hasn't been all kittens and rainbows and butterflies. You've had to experience a lot of things the hard way. You've experienced divorce, moving cities, like all of this. And still, you and me have had this conversation before, but I want to see maybe if you'll add to it. But you've maintained like a very similar weight, similar structure throughout all of those years, even while enduring some of the most difficult times in your life. And how how did you, even through all of the struggle, manage to maintain that? And I'm sure there were wobbles and things, but you didn't have to use the expression that most people use of falling off, falling off the, what is it? Fallen off, fallen
Falling off
down.
the wagon.
Yes, yes, the
Oh,
wagon.
yeah, that's a really good question. I think it has a lot to do with number one, really understanding foundation, like how to build a solid foundation to work from, right? I one time heard it was like a coach that I had say, you can't build a house on sand. Like you can't build a mansion on sand. And so people are trying to build the best body of their life, but they have the worst foundations. In fact, they
They
generally
have
have no
quicksand.
foundation.
They have quicksand.
They literally have quicksand and they're wondering why they can't hold it all. Like they're like, I just can't seem to pull the trigger on these things, or I can't seem to do all these things. But from a young age, probably because of the things I did overcome, like I want to be really clear. When I competed, that was not building a foundation for health. It's like the opposite. People that compete look healthy, but man, it's such an extreme sport. And so I definitely would say that it didn't help me build a foundation, but having a family kept me really grounded, right? Having kids kept me really grounded. And so I wanted to build really strong foundations for you guys. So from a young age, I understood all these things, right? Like I want to move my body in a way that feels good multiple times a week. It used to be probably 5 or 6 times a week. And now I'm like, okay, I can get the job done in, 4. I rarely work out 5 times a week, to be honest. Like I see it's diminishing returns for me. By the fifth day, I'm beat up enough that I'm like, I actually need to recover. But yeah, just building really solid, having a solid understanding of the foundations that I talked about earlier in this conversation. That and well, three things really. That my ability to reflect and say, okay, what's actually working here? And understanding that we can't manage what we don't measure. And so I, I
You want to explain that a bit more so people can understand it better?
Yeah, it's something I say all the time here, and I mean it, and I don't mean to, I hope it doesn't offend people because I know some people are like, well, I don't want to weigh myself. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that.
It's
Um,
almost like running from the elephant in the room. You know, if
it's
you're afraid to do it, chances are that's exactly what you should be focusing on.
mm, like I'll tell you when I almost for years and years and years, I want to say I've almost like over many years, I've almost always consistently like tracked where I'm at, right? Weight, photos, measurements. Like those are the three best ways to know whether your body composition is improving or not, or whether you're maintaining. And so that if you do those things, it doesn't mean that you have to be trying to lose weight or trying to do whatever, but you don't know if you're maintaining. And I'm sure people have other really clever ways of measuring. I know some people talk about, well, they put their jeans on and that there are lots of clever ways. But for me, it's weight, photos, measurements in centimeters, not inches,
It's
because they're way more
photos
accurate.
as well. Photos are the biggest. They tell you everything you need to know
Mhm.
without telling you
And
anything.
yeah, you know what? Over the years, like in times that I haven't done those things, even as someone who is well versed in, like, I live and work in a training studio, right? I know how to move my body. We try to stay very, very active. And even if we're not trying to, we are because we have a small human and a dog. And so we're just more active, I would say. But in times that I haven't measured, where I've been like, I'll do it next time, I'll do it next time, I'll do it next time. I'm not feeling that good. I'm not gonna do it right now. Those are the times that I've always like wobbled a little bit, to be honest. It's when I don't pay as much attention to my nutrition. It's when I don't pay as much attention to my sleep. It's when I'm not, it is the thing that anchors me to keeping the pillars all standing, to be honest. And
That it anchors you because if you don't have that anchor, that foundation, you get caught up in the whirlwind and you don't even know where you're at. You can't even see. You just
no,
don't.
it's you have no direction, right? And I think that there would be people that would argue against that, but in all my years experience and having come from, a disordered background and different things, like it is the best way that I have found to keep on top of like to keep myself on the track that I want to be on, to keep me in alignment with, like, I want to live my life as long as I'm on this earth breathing. I want to be able to experience life with joy and energy and mobility, all of these things. And so for me, I'm like, well, if my goal is to be 85 years old, going skydiving, climbing mountains, traveling around the world with the people I love the most, well, I'm not going to wait until I'm 75 to then be like, did I do enough to ensure that I would live out the rest of my years? Like, no, it starts now at 40, right? Like at 40 years old, I'm like, we
It
need
starts even
to,
before that for you.
oh yeah, like it's been a journey for me. Like I've been, you know, taking care of, I would say, it sounds kind of funny to say it this way, but I've been taking really, really good care of myself for half of my life, for as long as I've been an adult and been in control of, and I had great parents and a great upbringing. Like I grew up running through fields in northern Saskatchewan, riding my bike, swimming, like doing all these crazy things. Well, they weren't really crazy, to be honest, but I was very active as a child because of, the way I was brought up. And so I just was
You know,
able
in the
to.
past, like you've always relatively taken care of yourself, but in the past like 5 years is when you've really delved deep into like really taking care of yourself and making it a priority, knowing that it's an investment in your future with your grandchildren and maybe their children as well. It like who knows, health is the biggest, it's wealth. Health is wealth. It's
Health is wealth. Oh my God, yes. And like, oh my goodness, people, we need a banner. We need people to shout this from the rooftops. Like, taking care of yourself is not a liability. It is
it's the
not a
most
liability. It is
selfless
an
thing you
asset.
can do too. It's the most
Yeah.
selfless thing you can do too.
It's not withdrawing. Like, I still meet people who believe that if they go to the gym and they manage their nutrition and they manage their sleep and they don't drink as much and they manage these parts of their life, they feel like they're taking withdrawals from the pot. But I'm like, oh my God, you just haven't,
If you
no
think of
one's taught you yet that it's on the back end that you'll see that. It's when you're 60 years old, it's when you're 70 years old, it's when you're 80, 90, 100. The book Lifespan, Peter Sinclair, no, what's his name? Sinclair. Why can't I think of his name? Anyway, it doesn't matter. The
But
book
we'll put it in
Lifespan,
the description.
he talks, I'll put it, his name isn't Peter Sinclair. Peter Sinclair is someone I went to high school with. What am I talking about? But his name is, oh, David Sinclair. How could I not remember that? He talks about how in the very near future, like he believes that we have the capability to live to be 120 years old. Which like, and he says it's not even unrealistic because people exercise, we have, a great healthcare system. People just are generally people have everything they need to live a way healthier lifestyle, like a way healthier lifestyle. Exercise is so accessible for everybody. The understanding of nutrition is so accessible for everybody. Like it's so crazy. So can you imagine I'm 40 years old right now. If I could live to 120,
That's
like that means I'm only a quarter of the way through my life.
yeah, that's beautiful. That would be
Sorry, that
wonderful.
that would
I
mean I
think
lived
one
once.
thing too, though, that I do want to mention is like this is incredible. Yes, but also I think it's kind of like a little bit daunting to some people because they're like, "Oh, I won't see the effects until I'm 60 or 70. I don't even want to live that long, like."
Mhm.
But really on like a short term, it really only takes like 2, 3 months of actually taking care of yourself
Oh
to feel
yeah.
like a completely different person. And then that's when you truly understand, like, oh, when I'm older, I want to feel this way. I want to feel this way as long as possible.
I think we need to start understanding that it is way easier to play, like to take care of yourself now and to be able to maintain this for as long as possible. Actually today I was like, what is the goal? Like the goal is to be ageless, right? To in ways I think stop time and not not like in a weird way, but I'm like, if I can take care of my mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health and my relationships, which I think is probably the foundation for all of those things,
Mhm.
I think that I could stay relatively similar to the way I am for an unforeseen amount of time,
Well,
right? I'm
past,
not saying that I'm going to stop the clock, but when women put on muscle and they start to eat healthier and they start to take care of they start to sleep better and they take care of their relationships and we talked about going in and dusting out the cobwebs, dealing with things that have happened maybe in your past, like traumas. When you start turning those stones over, I
almost
think
age in
that,
reverse, even. I was gonna say you
yeah.
look pretty much the same since you were 30 for the past 10 years, but I'm like, actually, no, you actually look way better than you did 10 years ago.
Well,
And
thanks.
that's like the eating, the nutrition, it's mastering all of those pillars.
Mhm. It's
And
women chase and maybe men to chase the fountain of youth, but what like you can see it. I've been witness to it so darn many times in the training studio where someone comes in, they look their age, give or take, not give. Uh sorry, they look their age maybe plus 10 to 15 years. And over the course of 12 months, if they're 50, they end up looking like they're 35.
Well, it's like you hold the magic and you just go, "Meow," and then
It's
all of a sudden
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I think it's just, it's to do with everything. It's not due to one singular thing. However, building muscle for women, it absolutely is the fountain of youth. It absolutely is the fountain of youth. There's no disputing it. There's no disputing it.
and even on like my end of the spectrum where not currently fighting age at all, but I found even it's matured my body, but in a very healthy looking way.
Mm.
So for young girls even, it's incredible, especially girls who are they're they're chasing to look a certain way, but really they just aren't embodied in their body yet. And I
Yeah.
think that's even what it is with the women who are like chasing the youth. They just aren't embodied in their body. And
Hmm.
it's the movement, it's mastering all of those pillars that allows you to feel like the person that you're supposed to be, that you've always wanted to be.
Yeah. I'm loving this conversation so much. I want to bring it back though, because we were talking about building strong foundations with those pillars and what happens when people fall off the wagon. And we had such a great conversation earlier today where you said we need to talk about not falling off the wagon, not doing things, going reverting to old habits, but how do you reduce the time
The
in
bounce
the
back
wobble?
period. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
had a
so,
conversation a while ago where like I think back to say when I was in high school, I'd go through these periods of times where it'd be like a couple of months where I wouldn't do too well. And then finally I'd get back on track or get back on
mhm,
track. And then it's working on these pillars, working on my relationship with myself, my sleep, my eating habits, all of it, where all of a sudden it got to be about, 3 weeks where, I wouldn't do too well and then I'd be able to get back on track. And then as that progressed and the more solid my foundation became, the more I really invested in my health, my wellness, my spirituality was probably the biggest.
mhm.
Um, and that was just for me because I had relatively no foundation in that aspect at all. I had no reason for life, so I didn't understand, like I didn't have my own meaning, what gave me purpose, which really allowed me to like fall off for the sake of the video. Um, Whereas now it's gone to be like maybe I have an off day close to my period, the day before my period. And and now like because I've mastered those foundations and all of that and have become really embodied in who I am, I don't nearly it's that bounce back period of getting back on track. It doesn't really exist. I have like
Mhm.
one hormonal day per
And
month,
it's
which is
it's
totally un
probably like it's probably due to a multitude of things, right? Like you realize that, like we said earlier, all or nothing leaves you all or nothing. You have really strong foundations with exercise, nutrition, hydration, for the most part, sleep, like you said, like all these things. But the goal and like a deep understanding that the goal isn't to not have ups and downs. It's just for most people, they have these like mountains and valleys and mountains and valleys. And so it's good, right? They're all or nothing. They're all, nothing. Nothing. And so the goal is to create, like I tell people all the time, I'm like, you're not going to not have ups and downs. You're not going to not have things come up. You're not going to not miss exercise or have a weekend where you know, enjoy yourself and you eat more soul food than whole food. But the goal is to create these more kind of rolling hills, right? So
or
that you
even
don't
like
need bounce
this
back periods.
where you're going up for the most part, you like have that aim of like health, wellness, managing those pillars, and it's like this, but you're still going up and you're still
Exactly.
getting better.
And so bringing it back, like I said, the goal is to not have those things, but to develop an understanding that if you can usually, in most cases, if you can just get one of those pillars back on track, if you can just get your sleep. And it's whatever one you can manage, right? There's nothing set in stone. It's whatever one you can manage at any given point, and that might change from time to time to time. But if right now all you can manage is going to bed earlier and getting better sleep, that will start to bring everything else back online. If that's just not feeling like going to the gym, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway because when I woke up this morning, it's what I said I was going to do. That starts to bring, right? You don't go to the gym and then go home and binge on Oreos. Like it's usually the thing that brings things back online. And it might take a little bit of time to get them all back, all those pillars back standing, but you only need to do one, right? Do the one that's easiest. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's reconnecting if you haven't been getting along with your partner. If you both have been, having your own struggles, maybe it's just reconnecting, like being intentional. Do you have any last comments you want to add? I hate to cut this off really short, but I just don't want to cut out and die on you here.
I don't think so. I think I asked you what I wanted to ask you,
I
and
feel like this needs to be a to be continued part 2.
I think we say that with every video.
I know. We definitely do.
Yeah.
Um,
Anything else you want to ask me or add?
I don't think so. I had made a few notes and I think that we kind of covered everything. Like just, I think you're doing such a phenomenal job. Like watching you, it's so cool to see you transition into this thing that I see other people trying to achieve or achieving, like where they're shortening the gap between the times that they're, doing really well and having to restart, I suppose. But it's been such a cool thing to watch you, like a woman in my own household, and to have so many really like fulfilling conversations around change and like mainly the relationship you have with yourself, and just having a high standard but having compassion. And I know I'm rambling right now, but seeing how the other day when I was like, hey, this might be TMI on here, but when I was like, hey, are you coming to work out today? And you were like, you know what? No, like I just got my period. I'm actually just gonna rest today. That honestly, it was so amazing. It made me so proud of you.
Oh, that was like before I would have just gone to the gym because I'd be like, oh, I have to go to the gym. But I'm like, no, I get to go to the gym. I get to move my body and I get to feel really good. And that wasn't a day for that. That was a day where my body told me, you need rest.
Yeah, that was a
And
work in day, not a workout day.
exactly, that was a working day.
Oh my God. Okay, well, let's definitely do a part 2. Because I think that we can, cover some of these things even a little bit more in depth. We should do nutrition and training. Uh,
Definitely.
we should have a conversation about nutrition and training because I know a lot of people, so many women come to me for tips on that, and for like they're trying to achieve something and they're just not going about it the right way. And
And
so
it has
let's
the potential to be it like it's it's super simple. It's just not always easy for everyone to grasp. Sometimes the simplest things are we're like, no, there's no way it's that easy. We like to overcomplicate things.
it's
So
so
I
true.
definitely think that would be a special conversation to have.
Yeah, let's plan that for next one. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate you so much. And Ella,
Thank you
I
guys
know I
so
tell you this,
much.
I tell you this every time, but I adore having conversations with you. It feels so good to me. So, yeah,
Oh,
excited
I
to have
love
another one.
talking with you too. You're my best friend.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.